Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is going to be my next installment into the Triple Crown Winners collection that I'm working on. I am almost done with this collection, but I'm coming down to needing some of the harder cards to find. And one in particular, I almost snagged, but I kind of took too long to think about pouncing on it, and it was snatched up within like an hour of it being listed. So I had sour grapes on that one, but I do have 5 players which I'm gonna share with you. And we're gonna start from the earliest to the most recent card. So the earliest card that I have is this John Clarkson card, who played for Boston, the Boston Beaneaters. John Clarkson won the Triple Crown in 1889 with wins of 49 wins, an ERA of 273, and 284 strikeouts. This is a card that took me a while to pick up. As you can tell, it has a little bit of paper loss in the back, but other than that, the card is pretty much intact, and it got a grade 2. Thought usually when cards have a paper loss like this, it gets an automatic 1, but this one got a 2. So it's a beautiful example. I love this card. I would have been happy with any example of John Clarkson, but to land this one, I was really happy. Now, I guess to get into a little bit from what I researched from his Triple Crown year was that they were going down to the wire for the pennant against the New York Giants. They were only a half game out from winning the pennant with 15 games left in the season. And in order to try to win the pennant, with some extra compensation, Clarkson was convinced to go at it with those 15 games and pitch all of them. He actually started in only 13 of those 15 games, but he really tried hard. Unfortunately, for those 2 games he missed, he needed rest, and you can't blame him. And it turned out that on the last game of the season, they were actually tied, the Giants and the Beaneaters. And of course, John Clarkson took the mound, but unfortunately he would lose that game 6-1. And obviously fatigue must have been a reason why he just didn't perform well in that game. But it turned out that both teams won 83 games, but the Giants lost 43 games and the Beaneaters lost 45 games. I'm pretty sure they would do the rainouts that they were an uneven amount of games, but there was a big brouhaha after the season ended, how it was unfair that the Beaneaters got penalized for losing 2 more games when the Giants didn't have to play those 2 games, and who knows what the outcome would have been. But unfortunately, that's what it was. John Clarkson didn't have anything to show for that year as far as trying to compete for a championship, but he did end up with a Triple Crown. So my next card, that's the earliest, would be this one from Sai Young. Sai Young, he won the Triple Crown in 1901. And this is a card I looked for a while. It happens to be a Tolstoy back, for those that are curious with the back. So it's a pretty cool back. And to add that with a nice example too, again, of Sai Young, I'm really happy. Let me put this in the background while I get into a little bit of Sai Young's Triple Crown season. So Sai Young used to play for Cleveland and then St. Louis. And in 1901, the American League was formed, and Sai Young decided to join the Boston Americans because he's from Boston, and also the St. Louis owner, Frank Robinson, thought that at age 34, he was starting to show some cracks, some chinks in the armor. But in 1900, they condensed the teams in the league from 12 teams to 8 teams. So when they condensed the teams, obviously they weeded out all of the sucky players, and it turned out that Sai Young had to play against a stout lineup almost every night, or day I should say. And then on top of that, he had bruised ribs from a collision that he had with another player in a play, and he had a tough time pitching that year. So he only won 20 games that season, but it was a little bit less than what they were accustomed to. So they thought he was basically, his skill set was dwindling down. So it led for him to pave the road to go to the Boston Americans, and him with Nap Lajoie lent credibility to the American League as two big stars went over to the American League to play. Now the downside was that Sai Young ended up pitching against lesser players, as the American League was now trying to get, as many players to form teams, and some of them weren't like major league caliber. So he ended up dominating that league, which resulted in a Triple Crown year in which he won 33 games. He had a 1.62 ERA and had 158 strikeouts. It turned out that in that year, Nap Lajoie and Sai Young both won the Triple Crown as they dominated lesser skilled players. So with that being said, next up, let me throw in a hitter here, as I'm going to share with you my next Triple Crown winner, and that is Lou Gehrig here with his 1934 Gaudi card. This is my favorite Lou Gehrig card ever made. It's also in grade 2. I've had this card for a little while in my collection, and I'm still just as prideful of it as when I first picked it up. Let me put this one in the background and get a little bit into his Triple Crown year. So in 1934, that was his Triple Crown year. It would actually be the last year he and Babe Ruth would play together in a season. And as Babe Ruth's career was winding down, Lou Gehrig was pretty much still in the peak and prime of his career. As you could tell with his 363 average, 49 bombs, and 166 RBIs. And this actually led the whole majors, both American League and National Leagues, which is one of the rare times when someone was able to rule all of baseball in those counting stats. It actually was a year in which he didn't even win the MVP. He was 5th in MVP, as their team wasn't as good as the Tigers that year. And in those days, it seemed like if they didn't care about stats, they would try to always give it to a player on a winning team. So Mickey Cochran brought home the honors, and second place was Charlie Gehringer. And then Lefty Gomez, who won the Triple Crown that year also, he was in 3rd place, and Schoolboy Rowe, the pitcher for the Tigers, was 4th, and then 5th was, lo and behold, Lou Gehrig. Now, the other 4 players who led all of majors with their counting stats in a season was Ty Cobb in 1909, Rogers Hornsby in 1925, and Ted Williams in 1942, and then my man Mickey Mantle in 1956. So these are the only 5 players with Lou Gehrig that dominated all of majors with their counting stats, with RBIs, homers, and average. My next player, which I'm going to spotlight, is someone who won the Triple Crown for pitching 3 times. And it's a rarity to have someone dominate 3 times with the Triple Crown, but that is none other than Sandy Kofax. And this man did it on 3 separate occasions: 1963, 1965, and 1966. Now, it's not all roses with Sandy Kofax. Let me show you the back here of this card if you're curious. It's a beautiful grade 4. Let me put these back a little bit. So, the sad truth about Sandy Kofax was he was a little bit much like Randy Johnson, where it took a little while for him to get used to his body. His coordination just wasn't that great, but he had nothing but raw ability, a crazy fastball, and a good curveball that was nose to toes. But his consistency, he struggled with consistency, finding the plate sometimes. Sometimes he would pitch a great game and pitch a no-hitter, and then he'd probably throw up 2 skunks the next 2 outings, and then dominate again for 3 games. So much like Randy Johnson, it took a while for him to get his coordination right, and also with one other bit of advice, which was, dude, basically throw a little bit less, harder, and maybe you'll gain a little bit more control. Based on that advice, at the age of 25, coming into his prime, he started figuring it out. And then by age 27 in 1963, that's when it all came together, and he was dominating the league. In 1963, had a 25-5 record with a 188 ERA and a 306 strikeouts. And one of the most amazing things I think he did was he pitched 20 complete games, and out of those 20 complete games, he had 11 of them go for shutouts. Now, he won the MVP also that year, the Sai Young, and it was his first Triple Crown at the age of 27. And then the thing about him was that it was tough luck, unlike Randy Johnson, who had great health throughout his career and was able to pitch a long time and dominate for a long time. Sandy Kofax was dominating right around the time that he was diagnosed with an arthritic shoulder. And this started to deteriorate his ability to throw with a lot of pain. So there were times he would need like a week or 2 weeks off because the pain was just unbearable. They would give him medication to try to help him alleviate that pain so he could go out there and pitch again. But it was something that he had to deal with for the remainder of his career, although he was now starting to figure it out. So in 65, he went back and won a Triple Crown with a 26-8 record, 204 ERA, and 382 strikeouts. Now, this would be the most strikeouts in the league for a long time, I think since Rube Waddell did it. That he was in the 340s. And unfortunately, he did win the Cy Young that year. He did have 27 complete games that year, which was more than he's ever had, with 8 of them going for shutouts. But again, it was just getting worse and worse with his pain and suffering. And he actually almost won the MVP that year. He was second place to Willie Mays, so he could have had 2 MVPs as a pitcher. And then 1966, he left all the doubters, shut them all up, because he went on to put up the best career with wins, 27-9 record, the lowest ERA of 173 ERA, and 317 strikeouts with, again, 27 complete games, 5 of them for shutouts. And unfortunately, this would be the last year in his career. He just couldn't stand the pain no more, and he went out on top. Unfortunately, he didn't win the MVP again. He was second place to Roberto Clemente. He could have had 3 MVPs. It's unbelievable what he did within like 6 years, 4 to be exact, where he just dominated that small window and was considered one of the best pitchers to ever toe the rubber. And those are 3 Triple Crown years for Sandy Koufax. And then it seemed like he went on to pass the baton to another Dodgers great, and that is Clayton Kershaw, who's sure to be a Hall of Famer in the future. This is rookie card, ungraded, of course. Let me put this in the background. So he finally passed the baton to Clayton Kershaw, who won a Triple Crown in 2011 with a 21-5 record, 228 ERA, and 248 strikeouts. He was dominant throughout the year. He was coming into his own at a ripe, young, early stage in his career, and he was the best pitcher in baseball. But what was great about that season was he was taking the baton from the freak Tim Lincecum, who had actually won 2 Cy Youngs previously and was a 3-time defending strikeout leader. But Tim Lincecum wasn't going out and giving him the throne without a fight, so they locked horns 4 times throughout that season. And the results were incredible. Throughout those 4 games, Lincecum posted a 1.24 ERA over 29 innings, but failed to win a game. Why? Because Clayton Kershaw posted a 0.30 ERA over 30 innings and a third, as he won all 4 games. And each game had a deciding score of either 1-0 or 2-1. in what went down as one of the most historic matchups between he and Lincecum throughout 2011. And that's the type of dominance that Clayton Kershaw had. He won Pitcher of the Month, Player of the Month. No one could touch him. And those are my 5 Triple Crown winners. And as always, it's time to check off some names from the list. As you can tell, there are a lot of check marks. So it's time to check off. I got John Clarkson, Sai Young. I got Sandy Kofax, Clayton Kershaw. And then on the hitter side, I got Gehrig. So now all that's left for me to go after is Paul Hines and these 4 pitchers: Amos Rusty, Gehrig, Old Hoss Radbourn, Tommy Bond. Old Hoss Radbourn was the player which I lost out on. Card came up from an old judge, and I don't know, it was a 4-figure card, so it took me a little while to wrap my head around buying that card, and within that time I was thinking about it, boom, it got snatched up. So yeah, that one stings a little. I should have just pounced on it because it rarely comes up. But with that being said, this will probably be the last video in a long while because I don't know when I'm going to come upon any of those cards from those players. But stay tuned, you never know. Until then, I'm gonna wish everyone happy hunting when it comes to cards. I want everyone to stay safe and be blessed, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.